Welcome to Insuring Clinical Trials, What Do I Need to Know? I'm Lynn Carney from Medmarc Insurance. My colleague George Ade and I will be presenting today. Medmarc was founded by 31 members of AvaMed in 1979 when they couldn't find an insurance company to insure their products. They asked their general counsel to form an insurance company, thus Medmarc was born. Since then, Medmarc has gone on to insure over $1 trillion in the global sales of medical technology and handled all the claims and lawsuits that have resulted in the US and around the world. Also, at any given time, Medmarc is insuring over 1 million clinical trial participants for the trial sponsors. As a sponsor of a clinical trial, it is almost always required that you have insurance that covers the trial participants for injury or death. You are also almost always required to provide coverage for the trial site, the CROs, the clinical trial sites, and anyone performing the trial as an additional insured under your policy. While we try to keep this presentation generic, we are explaining Medmarc's coverage features in the presentation. We need to warn you that if you obtain coverage from another carrier, you should read that policy carefully, especially in the terms of who is covered, what is excluded, and what duties may be required should you change any of the information you provided in your application to the company, especially any change to a protocol, informed consent, or the number of participants. Where will you be doing your trials? I'll cover domestic, the US and Canadian clinical trials, while George will cover the US. Products liability and clinical trial policy. Coverage for clinical trials being held in the US and Canada. Medmarc actually offers a true worldwide coverage, meaning that any claim you have in any foreign country, Medmarc will defend you in that country. We do not require the claim to be brought back to the US. We can cover trials outside the US in some circumstances. Like I said, we are true worldwide. We are happy to cover trials outside the US. However, many foreign countries have enacted regulations for locally admitted policies. That means that they want an insurance carrier that has bricks and mortar in that country to cover the clinical trial. Medmarc offers difference in conditions and difference in limits. Difference in conditions is a lot of these locally admitted policies have a narrow band of coverage. Medmarc is very broad. You can have a claim that falls outside that narrow band of coverage, and if you have a Medmarc policy at the same time, we will drop down and cover your difference in conditions. Difference in limits, similar situation. You have a policy with your local admitted carrier, and it may have a very low limit. If you have a Medmarc policy, you can increase your limits over that. Also, I want to, since we are true worldwide, if you have just your foreign admitted policy and your clinical trial participant is in country X where your trial is being located, they move and have a claim in country Y. Your local admitted policy only covers you in that country where the trial was. Your Medmarc policy will be worldwide and cover them there. We also can cover products being sold in the same policy. What you can think of is that if you have a brand new company that has a product already on the market and you're starting to bring a new product through clinical trial stage, you can put them on the same policy. There's no reason to buy two. Who is covered in this policy? Medical staff members. You may ask, what do we mean by that? We mean people following the protocol, such as your physicians, your nurses, and your EMTs, all following your protocol. Your scientific advisory board, and a host of others. I'd like to point out the clinical research organization. They often require you to have coverage and name them on the policy. This will cover them automatically while running your clinical trial. How is cost determined? Our underwriters have many years of experience reading informed consents and protocols, which lists the risk for them to classify it. The product or procedure tested. You can think about it. A non-invasive product is certainly going to cost less to insure than an implantable device. The health of participants. A young, healthy population certainly costs more to insure than an end-of-life clinical trial product that you're testing. The number of participants. If you're first in human 5-person trial, it certainly costs less than your phase 3, 3,000-person trial. The limits of liability are typically required by the trial site or CRO to set your limit. It is typically an annual policy, but sometimes can be for the length of trial, say 18 months or 2 years. Please contact your Medmarc representative for any questions. We can cover multiple trials. This is a great, important point. So Medmarc policy, you have one protocol, one trial site, let's say when you start your policy. Over the course of that policy term, you add different trial sites and different protocols. You are automatically covered with Medmarc. We will obviously pick that exposure up at renewal, but you don't have to worry about it. You have no insurance headache. Many of our competitors, you have to file your new trial site and your new protocol and get approval. That can cause insurance headaches, which none of us want. I'm going to turn it over to George now to do the OUS foreign clinical trial.
Thank you, Lynn. I'm happy to be here to give you a little information that may keep you from having ethics committee submission delays. So clinical trials outside the United States can be a little tougher and even challenging because every country has their own requirements. There are a few standards between countries. So if you're doing trials all over the EU or all over South America, each country will have different process to obtain insurance. Next slide. The first thing, as Lynn's explained earlier, is most of the countries require that you buy insurance from a locally admitted insurer. Next slide. In the US, you as the company being insured can decide what your coverage limit will be. Let's say you choose 2 million. But most foreign countries require a statutory limit and terms for coverage specific to their laws. An insured cannot decide what limits and coverage will be included. Unlike the US and Canada, there is no blanket trial coverage. A different policy is required for every country, and to make it even more difficult, a different policy is required for every protocol. Next slide. So same thing, how is cost determined? Just like in the US, it's the amount of risk of the trial, it's the product or the procedure being tested, health of the participants, number of participants, and then of course, limits of liability required by the local government. Remember, you don't set those limits. One nice benefit of a foreign trial is that the policy is issued for the length of the trial. You don't have to renew it annually. So if the trial will be running, let's say 2 years and 3 months, that's how you actually purchase the policy. And if you're slow getting started, you can't recruit as fast as you thought you could, your policy can usually be extended at no additional costs. Next slide. Every country has different requirements. Here are some of the unexpected differences that we've run into. Because most countries don't have the litigious atmosphere of the United States, the limits can sometimes be very low. Sometimes only enough to pay to reimburse the government for socialized medicine costs of treating a bodily injury, or to reimburse a pension if death or disability occurs. Sometimes there's no compensation for the patient or the patient's family. Payment in some countries must be made in local currency before the policy can even be issued. For example, China, India, Colombia will require you to pay the premium in local currency to a local bank before the policy can be issued. Some countries require a travel accident policy for the participants in case they're injured in an accident on their way to or from the trial site. Some countries require a copy of the CEO's driver's license or passport. In the past, I literally had one company stop planning their trial in a country because the CEO was worried they might steal his identification. Sometimes they require details of shareholders that own more than 25%. Some countries, for instance, Australia or Mexico, require a local CRO be the named insured or the policyholder, unless the company sponsoring the trial is a registered company with tax ID in that country. Also, as a warning, this is a really important warning. You should include language in an agreement that you have with the local CRO. Nothing worse than applying for insurance, obtaining the certificates for the ethics committee, only to find out that your CRO refuses to take this burden. Some countries also require multiple forms to be completed, actually in their local language too. For example, non-money laundering paperwork or paperwork proving the insured is a registered company. Next slide. Most companies doing their first trial outside the United States are not aware that almost all countries require that you submit proof of insurance coverage to the ethics committee during your filing. They assume since they have coverage provided by their country in the US, and they overlook the requirement and realize 2 days before the reserved date for submitting their packet to the EC, they don't have what they need. And then we try to help, not always with success. Remember, when the US is working, other parts of the world are asleep. And since many countries require the insurance come from a company in their own country, when we apply for your insurance, they're closed. Also, they can be very bureaucratic or have many applications ahead of yours. Sometimes a country might require multiple signatures on original documents with wet ink. And you know FedEx can't do 24 hours to several different countries. And then all countries will require an informed consent and protocol to apply for insurance. And of course, and also you'll do that with the ethics committee filing. And frequently the insurance company needs only the title of the trial in local language. I hope this information has been helpful. Lynn?
Thanks, George. That was really informative. I want to go over a moment our additional resources for clinical trials. For instance, we have many on-demand webinars. The one I am highlighting this moment was Clinical Trials in the Era of COVID-19. Diane Burke and Benjamin Zagarelli from Mintz-Levin explore the widespread disruptions the crisis is posing to clinical trials for life science companies and to research study sites. This and many others can be found on medmarc.com/news. Later this month at the Excel Leadership Seminar, George is hosting a panel with Diane Burke, Heather Simonson, and Ann Bunnenberg as panelists on the potential approaches to restarting clinical trials during COVID-19. That airs during the leadership seminar on September 30th at 12:45 and will be available to attendees of the MedTech conference after that time. If you have any questions, please contact me. My contact information is on the screen, or George, his is as well. And I urge you to go to medmarc.com to find our webinars, as well as our white papers. We have a lot of thought leadership papers helping you to get through regulatory hurdles. And I hope to see you at the next actual in-person MedTech conference. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time.